Great, so welcome to this special edition of the Authors at Google series. Today we're specifically focusing on the National School Lunch Program reform. And we have Ann Cooper in conversation with our very own Olivia Wu here. And Ann Cooper is also known as the Renegade Lunch Lady. She is a chef, nutrition services director, consultant, author, public speaker, and advocate for practical nutrition reform. And did you know that our very own chef, Olivia Wu, before becoming the executive chef at Oasis, was actually a journalist? She is a staff reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle. She's a food consultant and public relations specialist. She specializes in Asian cuisine and culture, and fusion cuisine, seafood, and sustainability. And believe it or not, they were actually both roommates. So you may remember that Alice Waters came here last year to share her vision for the delicious food revolution. And Ann Cooper is actually the person that Alice Waters and the Chez Panisse Foundation helped hire to make that vision a reality. So she helped eliminate nearly all the processed foods that were served within the Berkeley Unified School District. She introduced fresh and organic foods into the daily menu, and all while staying within the food district's budget. And then she's since moved to Boulder to keep spreading the change. So please welcome Chef Ann Cooper and Olivia Wu.
Welcome. Delighted to have you here. You've been to Google many times. And you've sat around and talked so much about how your day went, what the kids ate and what they didn't eat, and what your staff did. So I hope to just replicate some of that. And we're a small enough group here that maybe everybody can come up to the fireside with your questions. We have lots of questions for you in the next 3 hours, but I'm just going to kind of turn you on and let you talk. But you turned a freight train around here at Berkeley. Now you're at Boulder doing all of Boulder County. What are some of the similarities? What are new challenges? What are the aha moments that make you go, this is what I'm here to do, and I'm doing it again, or this is new? So talk to us about that.
Well, when I came to Berkeley, I came because Alice Waters asked me to come, and she says, you know, I had been doing this in New York, and she said, come to Berkeley. And I had also been asked to go to Harlem and work in Harlem, so I said yes to both, and I was working half-time in Harlem and half-time in Berkeley, commuting back and forth and trying to redo some schools in New York City as well. And I didn't actually think I'd ever take over the district. I thought I was just going to be a consultant, but after being a consultant for a year, I eventually took over the district. And because Alice and her foundation had been working here for 10 years, and also the Center for Eco-Literacy, there was a real strong movement in Berkeley to make change. However, the food was spectacularly bad. I mean, the kids had a 5-day rotating cycle of chicken nuggets, extremo burritos, pizza pockets, corn dogs, and grilled cheese sandwiches, all pre-processed, all prepared, all in plastic, and that's what the kids ate. And so you would think, Alice, Berkeley, you know, there's a real disconnect, but that's the kind of food we had. And it took 4 years. I mean, it was a real hard process. And even though we had a lot of parents' support in some areas, we had a lot of pushback in others. And we had a tremendous amount of pushback from the kids. But, you know, it was a process. And it took 4 years. But Berkeley was small. It was 16 schools, 9,600 kids. I could actually go to every school in one day. I had this huge support system, both financial and resources. The foundation raised $1.5 million over the time I was there to help the school district make the change. Then now the school district's, the nutrition services is totally financially budget neutral, financially viable, sustainable, systemic, all of that, but it took a long time. I also had a superintendent and a school board who were very supportive, and a superintendent who basically stood in front of me and said, you know, and protected me and said, we're going to make these changes, it's going to be painful, it's going to work. So when I get recruited to go to Boulder, you know, it was sort of a very similar community, and they said, yeah, we've got all this parent support, and we've got a community that's going to support us, we've done this great survey, and everyone really wants this, and the superintendent and the school board was like, yeah, everybody's ready, we're going to do this. And so I took the job there. It's much bigger. It's 50 or 48 schools spread over 550 square miles. I have 175 employees, none of which, or very few of which, were really motivated to make these kind of very difficult changes. Even though they had surveyed the parents, most of the parents who answered the survey, I think, were from Boulder proper. But the district encompasses 10 communities, and literally 65 miles from one end of my district to another. So even though the Boulder parents thought this was really great and they raised $500,000 and they were doing all this great stuff, there was all these other parents, and so I'm getting pushed. I've been there since July. I'm getting pushed back like, well, I feed my kids chicken nuggets at home, and who the hell are you to tell me not to? Why do you get to decide our kids can't have chicken nuggets or tater tots or high fructose corn syrup or popsicles or Pop-Tarts or candy? Who are you to? And then another challenge is the same Boulder parents who will write checks of $10,000 and $20,000 at the drop of a hat won't make their kids eat the food, because their kids might rather have sushi, or or the kids say, I don't really want that. I want this. I want you to get me this. So I'm struggling with the same parents who want me there, the same parents who raised $500,000 to get this program, off and running, aren't actually having their kids eat. So we went in there believing that we could raise participation, which is how you make these programs sustainable, and we've only been able to raise it 5%, which is just not enough. So in some ways, they've got this similar demographic, but in other ways, it's very different, and it's so spread out, it's really hard. So, I now have 5 managers, and they can't even get to every school every day. So we try and get to every school every other day now, but it's a lot of transition work.
How many schools are we talking?
48.
48 schools. Well, it's a lot. You're the most wired digital lady that I know. You have so many toys. So the obvious question for me is, Google. We want to be involved. We want to make a difference. What do? Do we find 500 other Ann Coopers? Do we go in on the policy level? Do we help raise money? Do we help map it? What can we do?
There's so many things, and I love that question because I need so much help. Berkeley or Boulder or any of the local communities you might have kids in or know where kids are, we cannot fix this one school at a time. There's 125,000 schools in this country. We cannot fix it one school at a time. There's almost 15,000 school districts. We can't even fix it one district at a time. It's impossible. We have to change it at the USDA level. For the very first time in my whole career around school food, I'm very optimistic. We have a president who actually talked about kids and food and health in the same sentence. The last president who talked about kids and food was Reagan, who made ketchup a vegetable. So I'm very optimistic with Obama. We now have a first lady who not only planted a garden at the White House that I've been fortunate enough to go to, but has a great personal chef who's invested in this. Now they have hoop houses, and she just announced to the Council of Mayors that she's taking on, and even in President Obama's State of the Union, they're taking on childhood obesity. And she specifically said in her speech to the mayors that had to happen in schools. I've met with the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, Kathleen Merrigan, who used to be on the National Organic Standards Board, and I was on the National Organic Standards Board, but I went on right after her. And she's very interested in this stuff. And I met with the undersecretary that's over school lunch, Janie Thornton, and she's interested in making change. I think the most optimistic thing, or thing that makes me the most optimistic, is Arnie Duncan. I haven't met with him, but I've met with his staff. And his staff said to me, we cannot close the achievement gap in America unless we fix school lunch. So for the first time, the Secretary of Ag and the Secretary of Education are actually talking about these two things, because the Secretary of Education is over education, Secretary of Ag is over school lunch. So there's two very divergent things. From Google's point of view, there's so much you could do to help. And one of the things, and any of you that are at lunch, or we could show this later, one of the things that's happening right now is we're building a web portal. And these little bands that say, I matter, feed me well, also have the URL for the web portal that we're building. And we're trying to build a web portal that will have all of the tools that every school and school district in the country can use to make these changes. It has menus and recipes and technical tools and videos and educational materials, and a big community piece, sort of AKA Facebook, where people can gather And so we're trying to build this. We partnered this past summer with Whole Foods. We raised $1 million to start the process of building the portal. But one of the things I've come to understand, which is really interesting, is I thought much of this up in my head, and we've been struggling to have the technology catch up to what we've kind of thought of. And so we're struggling with the technology to be able to build something that's actually can do all the things that I think it needs to do and can be seen by people in schools who can't get onto Facebook, who can't get onto Twitter, and who can't use YouTube or anything like that. So all schools ban all of that material. So how do you have some place where people can go that's sort of outside of the social networking arena that we all play in because schools can't play in it? The other thing around that, I think that from a Google standpoint, we need, whether it's the Google phone or the iPhone, we need some apps that can live in that, smartphone universe that school people could pull up recipes, that they could get answers to questions right from their phone, because many of them are out in the field and they may not be able to get to their computers. So that's another thing we're looking at, how do we develop that, and what is it that we really want to develop around that? And the other thing is on February 8th, the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, is going to make a speech, and the speech is going to be talking about school lunch. Right after the speech, my foundation is starting a national write-in campaign to get 1 million moms and dads or parents or caregivers to write to the Tom Vilsack and Kathleen Milliken at the USDA and their Senate and representatives, congresspeople and representatives. We're actually putting up a website with a map, and you'll be able to click on the map, and we've got a letter there that you'll be able to send in or customize a letter and send it in. And getting information like that out would be really, really helpful. So we're trying to have this stuff go viral. We've made an animated video that we hope will help us, a 90-second video that can be like a PSA that can be watched on smartphones or on computers. And we're trying to get a bunch of stuff going viral. So this is the year of the Child Nutrition Reauthorization that only happens every 4 or 5 years. This is where the federal government decides how much money they're going to give schools and what the guidelines are. The money thing's really important. Schools are now given $2.68 to feed a child per day if it's a free child. Of that, traditionally 2/3 goes to payroll and overhead. That leaves us less than $1 a day to feed a kid. And if any of you have been to Starbucks of late and gotten a venti latte or any of the other exotic, coffee shops, you'll know that you're paying $4 or $5. So, we now have a world where we spend $4 or $5 more on our daily coffee than we're spending on a kid's lunch. So that dollar doesn't really get you enough, but the USDA does decide that. Also, the USDA guidelines allow chicken nuggets, tater tots, chocolate milk, high fructose corn syrup, trans fats, popsicles, Pop-Tarts, and corn dogs. That's all allowed in the National School Lunch Program. So it's not enough just to get money. We absolutely have to get the guidelines changed.
Guidelines change. Besides the grassroots letter writing and getting to Vilsack, how can Google fit in with this?
Well, I think it would be an interesting thing. I mean, Google is sort of the center of the, so I'm from a Google outsider, someone who Googles on 1 million times a day regular basis. If Google is the holder of information in the world, if any bit of information you want or think you want can be gotten through Googling, then that's a way to collect information. So I guess the question would be, does Google want to push information? And if Google did want to push information, then it'd be really cool to be able to, when people are Googling school lunch or people were interested in some of these things, to be able to have a message or have specific sites that were supported. I mean, when you go on Google and you'll see those top ones, and that's the ones that are sponsored sites. So maybe there's a way to sponsor sites that are done by nonprofits or sponsor sites that are really pushing forward this mission, something like that. Yes?
Yeah.
So we don't, for the natural search results, we won't alter those because that has to be fair. And the better content your site has, whatever site it is, then the higher it'll get in the rankings. But in terms of like the ads, we do offer a Google Grants program to do that. So I don't know if you guys have taken part in that yet.
We haven't.
Right. So those advertisements are free, and we have a grants program. It's significant. So
cool.
We should talk about that.
Great.
Excellent. Yeah. So tell me the sequence, the ideal sequence you see things happening in from policy down. How do you think it should happen? And then maybe from out here we'll have ideas of how Google fits in.
In a perfect world, and we know we're in such an imperfect world, the problem with the USDA guidelines and the money is the USDA was founded to be the marketing arm for agribusiness. Mm-hmm. And their mission in the world, and it may be changing now, but their mission historically has been to promote big agriculture, and for the most part that big agriculture exports to other countries. So literally they're the marketing arm for Monsanto and DuPont and ADM and all these big, huge companies.
Chemical companies.
Chemical companies that have now decided they're food companies. And as well, Monsanto and DuPont brought us Agent Orange and stain-resistant carpet. They control 90% of the commercially produced seeds in America. So, it's just this crazy paradigm. But as well, they also support a lot of companies through the commodity food program. And our tax dollars spend about $45 billion a year subsidizing corn, soy, rice, wheat, and I think one other, cotton. And so the government buys all of this stuff. And the reason why sugar is so cheap is because corn is so highly subsidized. And the reason we have high fructose corn syrup in everything from hamburgers to hamburger rolls to hot dogs to gum to soda is because the corn is so overproduced and so cheap that now they make it into high fructose corn syrup. And so the USDA gets to decide what's allowed in the food. They buy this food, although it's not actually food because none of that corn that goes into high fructose corn syrup would ever be eaten. So they buy this stuff and then subsidize it to make this processed stuff that we send into schools. And to give you a perfect example of how awful the system is, a year ago this month, for some reason, Tyson decided they needed a bailout. So the USDA bailed out Tyson for $143 million. So they bought $143 million worth of chicken from Tyson. Now, there may not even have been chicken, but there was the virtual chicken. There was the idea that they needed money, so the government gave them the money in exchange for chicken. So then Tyson comes to schools all over the country, school districts, and says, the government just gave us all this money, we can give you free chicken. It's like, great, we'll take the chicken. Oh, no, you can get it in chicken nuggets, chicken patties, at around $40 a case. So the government buys the chicken from Tyson, who then sells the chicken that they've already been they've already been paid for the chicken. Then they sell the chicken to schools for the processing fee, and oh, by the way, then they add all that junk in there. So it's a very corrupt system. It's very highly ingrained. I don't know how we change the Farm Bill. It oversees that. I did talk to Kathleen Mergen, and I said the commodity system has to change, and she said pick your battles. So, I think that that's going to be a tough one. But if we could if there was a grassroots campaign in this country that would get people all over the country to say, we want better food for kids, then that would make it a priority to the Senate and the Congresspeople and the representatives who are actually the ones that vote on and decide on, like CNR and the Farm Bill. Because the USDA promotes it, the president promotes it, but when congressmen and representatives, and especially with any kind of partisanship, decide that their state is not going to do so well because now we're not going to have high fructose corn syrup in schools, and what's Iowa going to do if they can't produce high fructose corn syrup? So that's why it's so important to be able to touch just regular people like us, because we're the ones the elected officials supposedly listen to. So if we could have this mass belief and get people to actually do it. When the organic standards was originally going to be passed, it was going to allow GMOs, irradiated food, and sewage sludge as all part of the organic program. And there were 260,000 people who wrote in and said that's ridiculous, and they changed. Now, and that was before email, pretty much. People actually picked up a piece of paper and pencil and wrote and mailed. you know, now if we could get 1 million or 2 million people to say we want something different, I think it would start to force the government to look at this in a different way. So I think that that's what has to happen, and it has to happen at the government level, because we're not going to get more money and we're not going to get higher guidelines unless the government decides. And the guidelines without the money, or the money without the guidelines, you have to have both.
Farm Bill is next up for when? Next up for
2012.
2012.
So we're only 2 years away from the Farm Bill.
Right.
They're sort of like on these alternating years.
Okay. I want to zero in now on the kid level. So I visited Berkeley once in very early days when you first took over, and there were tostadas and stuff that the lunch ladies took out from the freezer and put in the microwave and pressed a button, and the kids read. And the only fresh thing there was green grapes, which the kids then took outside in the playground and threw at each other. So what can we do in the way of interactive stuff for kids so that they might eat those grapes rather than throw them at each other?
We might know that, you know, eating grapes in the middle of winter that come from Chile are the wrong thing.
It shouldn't be there, but
right.
Yes, right.
There's a tremendous educational piece needed. You know, I say that there are 5 big challenges. There are 5 big challenges to doing this work: food, finance, facilities, human resources, and marketing. Food, where's it going to come from, and how do we make sure it's good? Finances, how do we pay for it? Facilities, how do we cook it or store it, because most school kitchens don't have stoves or walk-ins? Human resources, how do we take all these men and women all across the country who have been using box cutters and can crushers, because everything came canned or frozen, and actually now give them raw chicken and tell them how to cook it? And then if you figured out all of that stuff, which is overwhelmingly hard, how do we get the kids to eat it? You know, we've now grown a generation of children that think chicken nuggets is a food group and hot Cheetos and soda is breakfast. You know, to get them to go from there to something else, you know, granola and yogurt for breakfast, or, you know, roast chicken and roast potatoes and salad bar at lunch, is hard. Hands-on experiential learning and cooking and gardening classes is really important. But it would be really great if there was you know, I've always thought that this should be part of our website, but we haven't even thought about trying to develop this yet. But if there was some interactive things, websites, really cool, compelling, or games. How about a game that kids would play that would, you know, be about food or farming or agriculture? I mean, how do we get the kids invested? I mean, how do we get kids that spend, you know, all of their time in front of a blue screen? How do we get them to understand that where a carrot comes from makes a difference, or that it may taste different if it comes from dirt or if it comes from, you know, the grocery store where it's been for 7 years? So I think interactive games, which there are none out there around sort of food farming, something like that could be really cool. Some good kid-oriented websites that would connect them, and there are none that I know of out there. And that doesn't replace the hands-on experiential learning. I mean, I think we need to get kids' hands dirty. We need to get them touching food. But we also need to start with them where they are. And the youngest kids are not too hard, but by middle school and high school, it's really hard to turn these kids around. So we have to give them something that's cool for them. You know, we need to make this stuff cool. Good food's got to be cool food. I mean, there's not a school, well, there's a couple. You know, there are very, 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 very few schools in America that has food even a tenth as good as what you guys have here every day.
Talk to me a little bit about, let me get, there are 4 F's here: Food, Family, Farming Foundation, your foundation.
So we started a foundation only to be able to bring in money, to raise money so that we could build this web portal. And about 2 years ago, I had this idea for this web portal for a number of years, and I sort of tried to shop it around and get people interested. But a couple of years ago, Kellogg Foundation gave us a planning grant, a 2-year planning grant, to start building it and start thinking about it and start planning it. And almost at the same time, I started working with Whole Foods, and over the 2 years between then and now, we were able to raise, you know, a significant amount of money and actually start implementation on the website. So the the foundation is really a vehicle to do projects. The main and only project right now is the Lunchbox Project. And of the Lunchbox Project, really what we're working on is the web portal and also some videos and this letter writing campaign. So all of these campaigns around Child Nutrition Act and also around just working with schools all across the country, it's all running through the foundation.
Are you doing anything with curricula at school? And does everybody who has, every school that has the food, gardening, and curriculum component know about each other? What's going on there?
No, it's really difficult. You know, everybody kind of gathers around the garden piece because it feels sexy and it's fun. And it's really, really, really important. But by and large, the gardens don't change what's on the plate in schools. And unless you can change what's on the plate in schools, you know, the gardens are just a kind of a cool, fun little add-on. And because they've been sort of sexy, a lot of foundations have thrown money at it. And so we're reinventing the wheel a lot. And one of the ideas around the web portal, the Lunchbox, is that we will have a whole area on curriculum, and we're trying to gather either the actual curriculum or links to the curriculum in one place so that every school and district that decides they want to have some of these things doesn't either A, get a foundation to pay for it again, or B, not be able to get it because they just can't find it. So there's plenty of curriculum out there. There's, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of curriculum, but mostly people don't know what each other's doing. There is not one repository for all of this, and that's what we hope the Lunchbox will be.
Excellent. Okay, good. Are there any questions from out there?
Or comments or thoughts?
Or comments or thoughts?
Oh.
You need a stepladder for the microphone.
I know, it's true. Okay, so how do you navigate between tackling everything and also staying focused enough to actually have an impact?
I don't sleep.
She does not.
So says my former roommate. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's because it's all the same work. Whether I'm in Boulder, you know, going to schools yesterday to see. I mean, yesterday I was sitting in one of the schools at lunch talking to kids who had gone to the salad bar and didn't have any protein, and we're giving them out these things because, you know, you got to get there. So I mean, that is just as instructive for the bigger work as the bigger work instructs how we deal in Boulder. So because it's all so entwined, I guess I can like do it all, or try as well as I can do it all, and it all interrelates. So there's nothing too different, and so I'm able to kind of tackle as much as I can, and I work with some really, really great people, and you know, I have a ton of support.
Is there a piece of this movement that is about mobilizing chefs or people in the organic movement to do a piece of this?
Sort of, but there's a challenge around mobilizing chefs for this, because most chefs have no concept of what it means to cook a meal for $1. They have no idea how to deal with a commodity food system. Many of them don't use recipes, never mind having the USDA guidelines to deal with. And trying to, you know, and then having kids as the ones who, you know, are your customers. So I think it's really important to be able to have the chefs involved, but we have to find the right place. You know, now that we have like Top Chef, and I just saw an advertisement for like the Warrior Kitchen. I mean, I don't know, it's all crazy, but now that chefs are celebrities, I think that there's a way to touch kids, especially high school kids and middle school kids, with chefs coming in and saying you need to eat better and here's some ways. But I don't think the answer is getting chefs in those kitchens cooking with the lunch ladies. I think you get a lot of this, because it's just, you know, you got to deal with these commodities, you got to figure all that part out. But if we could get chefs and rock stars and football stars and music, I mean, if we could get people that kids look up to help with this food piece and help say it's really important to eat well, I think that would be great.
Hi, I was wondering how your group is sort of addressing what I see as two sort of root causes of why food is so bad in schools. One would be the amount of money they're getting. Like $1 is, I think it's pretty much impossible. I mean, we have good food here at Google, but I've heard numbers about how much it costs. It's expensive, but it's very good food. And then two, the actual convincing of people that the food is harmful. Because that's what I think the biggest problem is that, I mean, kids can be told something and they'll sort of believe it. But, you know, if parents aren't telling them that it's harmful or they don't believe it's harmful, like you have to convince somebody that chicken nuggets isn't healthy. How are you addressing that part? I guess that's my main question.
Okay, well, so first thing on the dollar, with our animated video that we hope to show sometime, maybe at lunch, we just did this animated video, and we're actually, at the end of the video, it says, and it's all animated with a young child's voice, please give us an extra $1 for lunch. So my campaign, or our campaign that's going to start on February 9th, that is directed towards the USDA and congressmen and representatives, is we need an extra $1 for lunch dedicated to fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, whole grains, with a priority on regional procurement. So that's what we're pushing for. I can tell you I don't believe we'll get it. There's not, a lot of people are only asking for 35 cents. What the president has proposed is $1 billion for all child nutrition services, which would end up with about 15 or 20 cents added to the National School Lunch Program, which is just such a drop in the. I mean, I can't buy a piece of fruit. You know, for us to get good food to put on a kid's plate is 25 cents. So the idea that we're only going to raise the National School Lunch Program by half of that is just overwhelming. So that's our campaign. It's going to start in a few weeks. And, you know, that's what we're really pushing for. In the campaign, in the little video that we're going to try and get out there virally, it actually, in a really cute way, says, you know, 30% of kids are overweight, 1 in 3 kids are going to have diabetes in their lifetime. So we're trying to get this out without really scaring people and getting them to understand. I think our website will also have more information, but it's a way, there's a way to touch people in a school and in a district, but from nationwide, it's really going to take, I mean, I wish the government would do a national marketing campaign around good food. I mean, the government took on drinking and driving, they took on seat belts, they took on smoking, they really should take on the food issue. I'm not sure they will, because there's so much big business that, you know, stands to lose money if we eat healthier. I mean, if kids ate healthier, who wins? Well, not agribusiness, not the medical industrial complex, and not the pharmaceutical industrial complex. So who wins? The kids. They don't vote. So we really do have to try and educate their kids and their parents through soft marketing and PR that just gets this educational component. And, you know, it's hard. Billy Shore from Share Our Strength recently said that there's 1.1 million children and wake up hungry every day in America. And when you're hungry, you know, you don't necessarily care the quality of the food. It's just, you don't want your kids to be hungry. So we have an access issue. We have a demographic issue between rich and poor. You know, this is totally a social equity issue. You know, the CDC has said that of the children born in the year 2000, 1 out of every 3 Caucasians and 1 out of every 2 African Americans and Hispanics are going to have diabetes in their lifetime, many before they graduate high school. So we're looking at, within 10 years, 30 or 35% of kids insulin dependent. I mean, it's crazy. And it really runs along social equity lines. So we've also seen that the achievement gap and the life expectancy gap between rich and poor has grown 20% over the last 2 decades. So, you know, if you're poor in America, you're going to, you know, you're not going to do as well in school, and you're going to die younger. I mean, it's, you know, and it's a crazy thing for our country. So we really have to get the education out there.
Has anybody done metrics on the cost of health care for all of these young diabetics?
And as a matter of fact, Michael Pollan reported about 3 months ago in the New York Times that just 2 illnesses, diabetes and obesity, is now costing the country $260 billion. That's $250 billion. And if the health care initiative that may probably not pass now, which is awful, was only going to cost $900 billion, I mean, in 1 year we're spending 25% of the entire cost of the health care bill on these 2 diseases that are by and large preventable.
You should put that on the campaign for the extra $1.
Yeah, I mean,
just $1 more, right?
Yeah, well, it's just so crazy. And the National School Lunch Program right now spends $8.5 billion to feed 5.4 billion lunches a year. And so if we added $1, it would go from 8.5 billion to 14 billion. And people, I say this in Washington, and people like lose their mind. And I go, yeah, but okay, so it's costing $3 billion a week for the war that we try and pretend we're not in, and it's going to cost $260 billion a year for healthcare. So, what is it going to take for us as a nation to understand that we have to see what we eat as part of our health and part of preventative medicine? And the Health and Human Services recently came out and said that if we don't change how we're eating, every single person in our country is going to be overweight or obese by 2040. In 30 years. It's crazy. It's crazy.
What other metrics should we be looking at?
Well, the unfortunate thing that everybody wants to know is if you feed kids better food, will it raise their academic performance? This is a very, very, very hard. Well, it's sort of like duh. Okay, so when any of us eat crap all day or don't eat, how do we feel? We feel really awful. And when is it that we want sugar or caffeine? 3 in the afternoon when we skip lunch. I mean, we as adults know what happens to our body. We don't?
We don't pay attention to our bodies as adults.
Okay, maybe as adults we actually have the knowledge to pay attention to our bodies if we wanted to. But with all that being said, we do know that kids that eat a diet high in sugar and refined flour are really often diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, and dyslexia. We know that these same kids are almost always in the office, that they have really poor performance and really poor behavior. But everybody wants this study that's going to link better food to academic performance because of No Child Left Behind. Well, No Child Left Behind pretty much leaves every child behind. It was a crazy system. It's really bad from the food service point of view. There was just a study done in London, or in England. Jamie Oliver, a group around Jamie Oliver, just did a study and did actually show over there that better food, reduction in refined sugars and refined flours and more whole foods does indeed increase academic performance. What I actually think it does is not increase academic performance. It increases our ability to focus and think. When you give kids a lot of sugar, they just get really high and they crash. And I was working with some kids in Harlem one time, and we were making a PBS show, and we're just hanging around, and the kids are a little nervous, and there's cameras everywhere. So I said, what do you guys have for breakfast? Now, I came from a little town, middle of nowhere, and they said, snack crack. I'm in Harlem now. I said, what? They said snack crack. I said, what are you guys talking? They said, our parents go out in the street and get crack to get high, and all we need is 20-ounce soda and, candy, on the way to school. And we get just as high, this is what the kids, 13-year-olds, were saying. And so they know what we're doing to them. And I say we because, the adults have to make choices. Schools are drug-free zones. Schools are alcohol-free zones. They should be junk food-free zones.
Actually, just quickly, would you talk about open campuses versus closed campuses? I don't know the status of Berkeley. I don't know the status of Boulder. And is that going to be required for a big change like this? Yeah,
both Berkeley and Boulder have open campuses. It's a really crazy system. I do not know why we would want to send our children.
Tell people what that means.
So what open campus means is that in many high schools across the country, the students are allowed to leave campus for up to an hour in the middle of the day to go somewhere and do something. The idea is that you're letting them go off campus for lunch. Now, so these are, sometimes as young as 14, 15-year-old, 16-year-old kids who you send to school because you think that they're being educated and, given some supervision, that you then allow them to go wherever they want. One of the things that happens when you let them go wherever they want is they don't eat the food on campus, and they go eat junk food wherever they can because they don't want to spend a lot of money, and they can get a lot of calories and a lot of sugar and a lot of fat for 99 cents at some fast food place. Schools are starting to turn that around. It makes no sense to me. Why would we want to send our kids to school and then assume that they're going to spend some amount of time without any supervision doing whatever they're going to be doing and eating and drinking and smoking whatever they're going to be doing? And that happens to us all, at some point when we are probably a little older than, teenagers. But I do think we should close campuses. The big challenge on closing campuses now is they didn't make schools big enough, because they started letting kids out. So now, like in Berkeley, there's one high school, 3,200 students. They built a beautiful new cafeteria, and it seats 400. Well, duh. There's no way I can feed them. So, and Boulder's done the same thing. So schools have saved money by building buildings that don't have cafeteria seating for the kids because they figure the kids are going to go away. It's like, oh, good, we don't have to watch them for an hour. Well, that's not the, If we are educating the whole child for the whole day, we have them with us, so we have to understand that the lunch period is part of the educational experience. It's part of the whole child.
Do we know the policy people and the Congress people who are most friendly to childhood nutrition and such issues?
Yes, there will be up on the new website. There's some other websites that do have them all listed. We don't have them listed on our website yet, but we will have all that information up there.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Catherine.
I have a question that relates to that. It seemed to me for a long time that the real way to victory on this is to make this a bipartisan issue, which of course it inherently is. It's about children. And it's very hard to meet, any elected official who doesn't understand that that's fundamentally, really the constituency. Of course, it very quickly can become, though, a political and a bipartisan issue when I think grown-ups get involved. And so I actually really would love to see, a way to get children speaking more actively, and I challenge the people of Google to help make this happen, to let children more speak to their experience directly, to share their experiences with people, and to be the advocates for this change. Because what we've seen more and more is that these polarizing issues, including, healthcare has become, very, very difficult for people to understand, for the electorate to understand, for Democrats who originally thought it was a great idea to understand. For Republicans who felt that they were going to have to support it, to support it. Most people now feel like, as you said, Anne, a moment ago, it's kind of dead in the water. The children are incredibly powerful here. They can cut through a lot of this, but we have to find a way to give them actually, a voice.
There's a couple of interesting things happening. There's a couple of different groups. One is the Healthy Schools campaign that are actually having kids do sort of Iron Chef competitions, and the winners of the one in Chicago actually got to meet Sam Cass, who's the chef of the White House, or Michelle's chef, and working on these issues. And they actually just 2 days ago served the winning recipe from this year at all the Chicago schools. And so there's this group that's doing that. The other thing that's happening is there's a video competition, which is, what's the name of it?
The National Farm to School.
National Farm to School Network is hosting a video competition.
farmtoschool.org.
Yeah, and we're part of the sponsors of this, and they're getting kids all across the country to make little videos and upload them about what their school food is and what it should be and how it should. So those are two projects that are going on right now, and we're working with both of them.
And that's on YouTube, by the way.
That's on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, school to farm, sorry?
Farm to school. Farmtoschool.org.
Okay. A lot of data has already been gathered. What we don't want to do at Google is repeat any of that. And a lot of studies have been done, short of the one you're talking that connects academic performance to that. But is there any area of data collection that has not been done out there?
Well, there has not been a really unbiased national study done about what's really happening in schools. On our website, we're going to have areas where there's feasibility studies that have been done, so you can see them, and a lot of this information will be on the Lunchbox site. But what I don't think has happened is a really comprehensive look at what we are feeding our kids all across the country. The School Nutrition Association has done it, but not all school districts are involved, and they really have a bent to make it look good. So I don't know that we've ever collected, like, really what kids are eating. Like New York City was I think on the New York Times today, New York City just changed the fat content of their milk and saved, I don't know how many billions of calories. But, we shouldn't serve chocolate milk in schools, and, we haven't been able to get chocolate milk out of schools. So really to understand what we're feeding our kids and the health ramifications. I just don't think we've done a good enough job figuring that piece out.
You mentioned a list of people in Congress who are friendly toward healthy food in the schools. Do we have you identified people who are less than friendly or more on the agribusiness side and more to understand their argument and their problems to be solved as well, so that hopefully it could be a bipartisan issue?
Well, I don't have that list, but it'd be pretty easy to make. The argument from the other
half, right?
Iowa, Kansas.
Yes, Nicole.
Jill Richardson, Lavita Locavore, has a list of the unfriendlies on her.
Okay, so there's a website, lavitalocavore.org, and she has both the for and against people. The people who are against are not against healthy food for kids, but they're by and large from these states where all of their money comes from corn or soy. And there's basically not much good you can do with GMO corn or soy except make it into this stuff that goes into school food or health care, things like that.
Related question, have we learned much from the fight against tobacco and how to work with those states that are dependent upon tobacco? Because there's been, as a child of the 70s, tremendous progress in the last 30 years over tobacco.
Michael Pollan talks about this issue a lot, and, there's a lot of people who talk about this big ag and how it plays into the cigarette smoking issue. The thing that comes up, and you hear as the pushback all the time, is there was nothing positive about smoking and you didn't need to smoke. Everyone needs to eat. And there's the social component of that. There's a historical component of that. There's the familiar component of that. And big business just keeps pushing it as it's choice, it's choice, it's choice, it's exercise, yet they spend $20 billion a year marketing non-nutrient foods to kids. So I think a lot of people have thought how to connect these, and I do think, we've seen some people like trying to sue McDonald's, and then now we have these anti-veggie laws, like you can't sue. So I don't know if you guys remember when Oprah said that she wouldn't eat a hamburger again, then the National Cattlemen's Association sued her for billions of dollars. She won, but it cost her $1 billion to win. So there's these anti-defamation for vegetable laws. So you can't say a food isn't good. It's crazy. So people have sort of put their toe in. I think the way to go after this, and it's really hard to sue the government, but I'd love to see us think about a way to do a class action suit against some of these big companies and against the government that's feeding our kids that allows this food into schools. But it's really hard to sue a government. I want to. You can do it. I want to do it. What do you guys want all the time? Okay, it's yours, Ann. Yes.
I just want, we've been talking, you and I have been talking for a long time about suing the government, and I'm in. I'm ready. I was just going to say, maybe you want to mention Kelly Brownell, who recently had that pretty interesting report that he issued. This is a guy at Yale who is very interested in the parallels between anti-smoking sentiment and the kind of movement that grew up to kind of, to really take that over. And
so which report exactly? I mean,
the one that it's about like 9 months old, and it's well, actually, I can just send it to Mamie, but it's pretty interesting because it actually doesn't deal so much with the litigious aspects as the cultural aspects of marketing, and it's really it's really about the mistakes that people in the food movement have made and the mistakes that people in the tobacco movement are making, and how we can kind of try to capitalize on that. But I appreciated his study because it was more nuanced, and it did deal, of course, with this huge problem, which is that we all have to eat. But it really tried to talk a lot about kind of the marketing shifts. And
one of the things, one of the studies that's just really recently come out too is really finally proving this thing about marketing to kids, and that these big companies are so focused on marketing this non-nutrient foods to kids, and that the kids are basically brainwashed over this stuff. But Carol Brownell from the Red Center at Yale has been studying obesity in kids and adults for a long time and looking at all of these issues.
I want to bring the conversation back around to just what you do on the ground every day and what the kids are like. So describe for me what you have been, but what a kid's lunch was, starting with chicken nuggets. And then describe for us, for the dollar and the commodities that you got, what kind of meals they got by the end of your 4-year tenure at Berkeley.
In Berkeley, we started with the food I told you, the really crappy commodity food. And now in
so
Berkeley,
it was chicken nuggets, chocolate milk.
Chicken nuggets, corn dogs, extremo burritos, grilled cheese sandwiches, and pizza pockets, and they were all pre-frozen, pre-made things. And they had chocolate milk, and they had all kinds of sugary, desserty things and stuff like that. And
so how many calories was a meal like that?
A typical meal like that tends to be about 1,000 calories, and it tends to be 2,000 milligrams of sodium, which is more, or depending on, it's really more than a daily dose. So that's what it tends to be.
And calories from fat?
Almost all, like 60% calories from fat, and usually you'll run a meal like that, 15-20% sat fat, even though the law says 10.
Okay, and then what was the change?
That's within guidelines, right?
Well, it's going outside the guidelines. There's no guidelines on sugar or sodium. You're supposed to stay under 35% fat and under 10% sat fat, but because the way a lot of it works, people don't, but you can balance it over the course of a week. So then you feed them, something else that, doesn't have so much fat one day, and you can balance it out. So there's no law about how much you can feed kids. There's also no maximum calorie count, which, is really, really old and silly, So, there's no reason. I mean, they tell you can feed kids to 3,000 calories. It's like, huh? Do you not know there's an obesity crisis? But again, their job is to promote agriculture. So, and the easiest way to promote agriculture is corn and soy, because that's what we grow in this country. So now in Berkeley, although I haven't been there this year, but when I left last year, instead of chicken nuggets, it'd be roast chicken. Instead of tater tots, it'd be roast potatoes. There'd be a fresh vegetable. There's full salad bars in every school every day. It's local organic milk. No desserts, no high fructose corn syrup, no trans fats, all whole grains. And that's the same way we're walking towards in Boulder. I mean, we're certainly not in Boulder where Berkeley ended up because we're so, so beginning in it. But, there's a lot of pushback from kids. I mean, I just got an email today saying, why is it that we have to feed kids chicken with bones? And my comeback is, do you know any chickens that are growing without bones? I mean, and it's this crazy thing, now that we've convinced kids that chicken nuggets are actually chicken, I mean, who decided that chicken should be stars or giraffes or dinosaurs or, fish? Chicken is chicken. So why shouldn't chicken come on the bone? But the idea that kids don't even know that chicken has bones anymore and that we're not supposed to feed it to them. So in Boulder, our slowest day of the week now, and we're working on this in all kinds of ways, is chicken day, because kids don't know how to actually eat chicken anymore, and because they think chicken nuggets is chicken. So it's a struggle to make these changes. And, you would think roast potatoes for tater tots, but, there's lots of kids who haven't eaten a fresh roasted potato, that they think that potato tots are actually potatoes, or that, potato pearls, that instant potato stuff, is what mashed potatoes are supposed to taste like. So when we serve kids real mashed potatoes, they go, ugh. Or, we make real mac and cheese, and the kids hate it. One of our biggest complaints so far this year was the mac and cheese, and it's like, okay, so we're cooking pasta, and we've got real cheddar cheese, and we're making a cheese sauce, but, they're used to craft that yellow annatto powder that you mix with water and put some, little pasta stuff in it, and you cook it. So it's a huge change for kids, and they're so, kids, and the other comment I get a lot from kids is it's not salty enough. And this comes from the amount of salt they get in processed foods versus the amount of salt you would actually salt something with. So it's not salty enough, it's not spicy enough, it's, you know, because they're so used to this highly processed, really high sodium food. On the other hand, what we're seeing now is kids 10 years old that have kidney stones because of all the sodium in food. I mean, this is crazy. 10-year-old kids now with kidney stones and you know, preteen kids with high blood pressure and heart disease, and you know, it's just, it's really awful.
But on the other hand, there are days you would tell me about where a big bowl of Pink Lady apples, organic, disappeared. The kids liked them.
Well, absolutely. I mean, but in Berkeley, as that model, I mean, first of all, in Berkeley, we had cooking and gardening classes in every single school. That hands-on experiential learning is invaluable. You got to have a way to touch the kids. But by the end of the Berkeley project, or by the time I left, because it's ongoing and sustainable, I mean, kids were really eating the food, and the participation went up over 3 times. I started, we were doing about 500,000 meals a year, and I think they're going to hit almost 2 million this year. So we really grew participation. Kids are eating, they eat fruit, they eat vegetables, they eat off the salad bar. You know, not every kid eats great every day, but when you work with the kids, it's a process. I often say it takes 10 years. You've got to get the kids when they're young and get them through high school. Because if you just start in the middle, it's really hard.
Okay, actually, that's a great opportunity for me to stand up. Why start in school? What about first fives? What about earlier? What about preschool? You know, you're starting with children who've already had years of exposure to chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs and apples that were pre-cut in a bag. Why don't you start in preschools and get them eating healthy there?
We actually, in Berkeley and in Boulder, where preschools are involved with the public school system, we do. But as an entree point, the public school system is where we feed the most kids. And because that system is where we're actually paid, there's money available to do that. So I'm not at all saying we shouldn't start with younger kids. It's just the entree point that I think is one we can use. But most schools are actually starting with, you know, pre-kindergarten and stuff like that. So you do have an option. The thing about a lot of the preschools is they end before lunch. A lot of preschools are half day, so we're trying to get in those schools with breakfast. So I absolutely agree. I mean, the earlier you can touch the kids, the more you can touch the parents. I mean, we go to every PTA meeting. These calendars, I believe, are a marketing tool. I mean, marketing, talking to parents. And it's hard. You know, I met with a bunch of the leaders of the Hispanic community in Boulder a couple of days ago, and getting them to understand why it's so important and why we really have to do this it's just all, you know, it's a process, and it takes time, and it's not easy.
So an interesting point for discussion later on. In a sense, if we want to fight the fight, we need to maybe start with the preschool and consider that this generation of high school kids is lost, and focus there. So thank you for coming. Thank you so much, Anne. And we will, I know most of us will be continuing with this discussion for the next 2 hours. Thank you so much.
Thank you.